Trump must not retaliate unnecessarily against our Honduran migrants, who, as a rule, make a great contribution to the North American economy.
In a New Year's Day message to Hondurans, President Xiomara Castro set the most strident public red line for the Trump administration of any president in Central America. I'm Roman Gressier, the editor of El Faro English. It's Friday, January 10th. This is Central America in Minutes.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
they say globalism comes to die at CIPA, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes on El Faro English.
In 10 days, Donald Trump will be sworn into his second term as President of the United States. According to Axios, Trump's team briefed Senate Republicans on 100 executive orders he plans to enact in his first days in office. These include the reinstatement of the pandemic-era Title 42 border expulsion rules and citing the Immigration and Nationality Act and calling for state and local police to assist his deportation agenda. In Central America, governments have stayed mostly silent during the Trump transition. That made it all the more conspicuous when Xiomara Castro threatened to revoke U.S. military bases if the Trump administration significantly steps up its deportations to Honduras.
Facing a hostile attitude of mass expulsion of our brothers, we would have to consider a change to our policy of cooperation with the United States, especially in the military realm, in which without paying a cent for decades, they maintain military bases in our territory. In that case, they would lose all reason to exist in Honduras.
Honduras houses the Enrique Soto Cano Air Force Base, the center of operations for Joint Task Force Bravo of the U.S. Southern Command. The base, once a hub for U.S. regional counterinsurgency efforts in the 1980s, in more recent years has worked on disaster responses and anti-drug trafficking operations, according to the Army Times. This is not the first time that Castro threatens to majorly break with the policy of her predecessors. As El Faro English reported in April 2024, her administration announced Honduras' departure in August of last year from the World Bank Investor Dispute Resolution Forum. Her red line on Trump's deportation agenda cuts a much different figure than Guatemalan President Bernardo Arévalo. According to Reuters, Guatemala has expressed openness to receiving deportations of other Central American nations in order to extend a hand to the Trump administration, which the Guatemalan opposition is avidly courting. On migration, quote, "There has to be a regional response, and we want to be part of the solution," an anonymous Guatemalan official told Reuters, adding that the country already receives 14 deportation flights a week, compared to 10 reported to Reuters by the Honduran Foreign Ministry. The wire service reported that the Arévalo administration has been proactively meeting with the Trump transition team and the Heritage Foundation to discuss issues ranging from migration to drug trafficking to China. Guatemala and Belize are the only Central American countries to maintain ties with Taiwan. The presidents of Guatemala and Honduras bill themselves as Social Democrat and Democratic Socialist, respectively. Should Guatemala succeed in building inroads, Arévalo could prove an unlikely ally to Trump in Central America. In Panama, where migration is a long-standing soft spot of cooperation with the United States, conservative new president Jose Raúl Mulino has drawn his own red line for relations with Trump. No, he says, they will not put the Panama Canal back under U.S. control. Quote, "The sovereignty of our canal is not negotiable and is part of our history of struggle," said Panamanian Foreign Minister Javier Martínez Acha. The Panama Canal Authority told the Wall Street Journal that Trump's calls for preferential treatment for U.S. cargo would, quote, "lead to chaos." The rift opened over the holidays when Trump announced his desire to retake control of the Panama Canal. which the United States completely turned over to Panama in 1999 and is a major thoroughfare for Chinese business, as other countries. The handoff was begun in 1977 by military strongman Omar Torrijos and the late U.S. President Jimmy Carter. Trump has falsely accused Panama of allowing the Chinese military to control shipping routes, the New York Times reported, and of overcharging U.S. companies. On Wednesday, Trump also claimed he would try to gain control of Greenland and get rid of the, quote, artificially drawn line between the U.S. and Canada. When asked by a reporter, Trump said he would not rule out the use of military force.
Ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country.
The U.S. military invaded Panama in 1989, leading to the death of hundreds of civilians and the deposing of former CIA asset, military officer, and dictator Manuel Noriega. Trump's statements on the possibility of another military intervention in Panama drew protests outside the U.S. embassy there, including a blockade of the entrance by construction and teachers' unions days before Christmas. Trump made his most recent remarks on Panama one day before Martyrs' Day, a national day of remembrance of the murder of 21 Panamanian protesters on January 9, 1964, by police and U.S. troops. The 1964 demonstrators had assembled to denounce that a Panamanian flag was not allowed to be flown in the U.S.-controlled Canal Zone. The protests grew to broader opposition to U.S. presence in the country. Coincidentally, Jimmy Carter's funeral in Washington, the president who had turned over the canal, landed on the exact date this year of Martyrs' Day in Panama. Last, we turned back to Guatemala, where the highest courts in the country issued major rulings affecting press freedom. On Thursday, the Supreme Court ruled against publisher Jose Rubén Zamora's appeal that he not be sent back to preventive prison, according to the Guatemalan journalist collective No Nos Callarán. Zamora's family told El Faro English on Thursday afternoon that they had yet to be formally notified of the decision, but his next hearing will be held on Monday, January 13th at 8:15 in the morning in the 9th Sentencing Tribunal. If formally issued, the Supreme Court's decision would leave the Constitutional Court as the only remaining forum of legal recourse for Zamora to avoid being sent back to the Mariscal Zavala military prison. Zamora was released on house arrest in late October after a judge ruled that his over 800 days in preventive prison violated his due process rights. But the Constitutional Court just sent a warning shot of how it might rule on a Zamora appeal. On Wednesday, the magistrates dismissed an injunction by press freedom organizations, asking the court to shield journalists and columnists, some of them from Zamora's defunct paper El Periódico, from criminalization by the public prosecutor's office. This is Evelyn Blanc from No Nos Callarán on the rulings this week.
Both the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court are sending a message that they will maintain impunity for the worst cases in Guatemala of criminalization of the press. By reneging on their duty to defend the rule of law in Guatemala, they are telling citizens that they are defenseless.
Thanks for tuning into Central American Minutes. I wrote today's episode with production and original soundtrack by Omnion. Go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter at elfaro.net/en for more journalism that translates Central America. Hasta pronto.